They said I was too emotional for corporate life, I said. You'll read about this in the report. That was the last thing I said before walking out of Lennox Vale's glass tower for the final time. I remember the way my voice echoed through that sterile conference room, bouncing off the smug smiles of the executives who thought they'd just crushed another non-team player. My name's Maya Delacroix, and for 6 years, I gave everything to that company. I was the one who stayed late, fixed what others broke, and cleaned up mistakes my manager claimed as team wins. I believed in integrity, in doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. That belief used to make me proud. At Lennox Vale, it made me a target. The person who aimed best. Elliot Crane, my direct supervisor. To everyone else, Elliot was the golden boy of compliance. Charming, decisive, the guy who could make auditors laugh while quietly rewriting policy loopholes. He used to mentor me. We'd grab coffee at the corner cafe every Monday, and he'd say things like, "Maya, you've got the kind of conscience this place needs." I believed him. God, I believed him. But somewhere along the way, our dynamic shifted. He started forwarding my reports with his name on them, cutting me out of meetings. Delegating upward, he called it. And when I questioned a few unusual expense patterns last quarter, he told me to focus on my emotional well-being, corporate code for shut up or you'll regret it. Still, I tried to keep my head down. I needed the job. My mother's medical bills weren't forgiving, and neither was rent. Then came the restructuring memo. My position was being phased out. Elliot looked genuinely sorry when he told me. He even patted my shoulder and said, "You'll land somewhere better." I smiled, thanked him, and went home to write my exit interview, 5 carefully crafted pages. I didn't just vent. I documented every inconsistency, every whistleblower-worthy practice, every hidden audit trail. They thought it was just another emotional farewell. I thought it was justice. When HR called me in for the interview, half the management team showed up, all laughter and pity. "Just routine," they said. "We appreciate your feedback." They mocked every word that came out of my mouth. But as I slid that sealed envelope across the table, something flickered in Elliot's eyes. A split second of fear he tried to disguise with a grin. That's when I knew. Something wasn't right. And whatever it was about to explode. The morning after my exit interview, I woke up to silence. No alarm, no emails, no Slack pings. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't vibrating with Elliot's urgent messages. It should have felt freeing. It didn't. Something in my gut wouldn't quiet down. By noon, I checked my old company inbox, out of habit. It was already deactivated. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was a LinkedIn notification. Elliot had endorsed me for team collaboration and emotional intelligence. The same man who told me I was too emotional for corporate life. It felt mocking, like a private joke I wasn't in on. Later that day, a message from a former coworker, Jenna, popped up. "Hey, are you okay? They're saying some wild stuff about why you left. Elliot told the team you had a meltdown. Said compliance found inconsistencies in your reports. Is that true?" My heart dropped. Inconsistencies. My reports. I called her, but she didn't pick up. A minute later, she texted back. "Sorry, can't talk. They're monitoring everything. Just be careful." I reread that message a dozen times. Monitoring everything. Since when did HR spy on Slack threads? That night, I opened my laptop and went through my personal drive. I'd backed up everything, audit logs, expense sheets, timestamps. Everything clean. But then I noticed a folder I didn't remember creating, Archive, Personal. Inside, half my files were duplicated, same names, same timestamps, except the numbers were different. Different enough to look like I'd forged data. My hands trembled. Someone had edited my work. I checked the metadata, last modified by E. Crane. Elliot. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe he'd backed up the wrong files. Maybe someone else used his login. But deep down, I knew. The same flicker of fear I'd seen in his eyes during the exit interview. It wasn't guilt. It was self-preservation. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark. For the first time, I realized how fragile my truth was. One altered spreadsheet and I'd look like a liar, a fraud. I thought about all the late nights, the coffees, the mentoring sessions where he said he believed in me. How stupid that now. All I could remember was his hand on my shoulder the day he let me go. Warm, steady, rehearsed. Outside my window, the city lights blurred through the rain, and I wondered if Elliot was watching his own reflection, the man who'd built his career on trust, wondering how long before it cracked. I didn't know it then, but the cracks had already started to show. And when they did, everything he'd buried would surface. I didn't find the betrayal all at once. It came in fragments, whispers, half-truths, and the cruel efficiency of office gossip. It started with an email. Not to me, of course. It was about me. A forwarded thread from an anonymous sender, subject line, FYI, she's the reason for the audit delay. Attached were screenshots, my name, my supposed errors, even an excerpt from my exit interview, twisted and taken out of context. Someone had leaked it. And at the bottom of the thread, in the grey signature line, was the sender's name. Elliot Crane, Director of Compliance, Acting. Acting. That word froze me. My old position, my job, had been filled. By him. The same man who told me my role was being phased out. It wasn't about restructuring. It was about replacement. I called Jenna again. This time she answered in a whisper. Maya, you didn't hear this from me, okay? But after you left, Elliot told the execs you were under investigation. He said you tried to cover up a compliance breach, that you deleted evidence. Deleted. I could barely breathe. That's insane. He knows I backed up everything. I know, she said. But he's saying that's why you left, to avoid termination. It all clicked. The fake files. The rumor about inconsistencies. The meltdown story. He hadn't just sabotaged me, he'd rewritten my narrative. I'd been the scapegoat for his own crime. I opened one of my old audit reports, the one tied to last quarter's missing funds. And there it was, a pattern of altered numbers leading straight to Elliot's signature approvals. He hadn't deleted the evidence. He'd buried it under my name. That's why he smiled during my exit interview. That's why they laughed. They thought I'd been caught. I felt sick. The kind of sickness that starts in your stomach and burns its way to your throat. Years of loyalty, turned into a punchline. I slammed my laptop shut and just sat there. The hum of the city outside faded, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat. Steady, deliberate, dangerous. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about exposure. Because somewhere in those files, I still had the unedited versions, the clean copies, the ones no one knew existed. And when the time was right, they wouldn't just tell my side of the story. They'd end his. I looked at my reflection in the window, tired eyes, clenched jaw, a flicker of something sharp forming behind the pane. Not fear. Not grief. Something colder. Revenge. The night I uncovered Elliot's scheme, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, motionless, as the glow of my laptop screen dimmed into nothing. It's strange how silence can be louder than rage. I thought I'd cry, or scream, or throw something. Instead, I just went numb. 6 years of late nights, of defending a system I believed in, of covering for his mistakes. All of it collapsed under one truth. I'd been erased. I replayed every meeting, every compliment, every "you've got real potential" from Elliot. Every word now felt weaponized, rehearsed. The mentorship, the empathy, all camouflage for his climb. And I had helped him build the ladder. At dawn, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother, just a photo of her garden, sunlight breaking through the leaves. She'd written, "Keep growing through the cracks, my girl. You always do." That line, "you always do," snapped something inside me. Because she was right. I'd survived worse. When Dad left, when the bills piled up, when I took this job just to stay afloat, I didn't collapse then. Why was I collapsing now? I opened my laptop again, but this time, not as the woman who'd been betrayed, as the woman who'd been underestimated. I started gathering everything. Not the files Elliot had touched, the ones he didn't know I had. I'd kept an encrypted copy of every report I'd written, off-site, time-stamped, signed. I even had the original email threads, showing his approvals. Every single one. Hours passed like minutes. My despair turned into precision. I organized, color-coded, cross-referenced. What had been grief became evidence. That's when I found something new, a deleted folder buried in an old drive backup. Inside, internal memos between Elliot and the CFO. They'd known about the discrepancies for months. They'd pinned the cover-up on me to protect quarterly bonuses. My hands shook, but not from fear. From focus. For every lie they told, I had a truth ready to match it. I thought back to that exit interview, their laughter, their smug certainty that I was powerless. I'd walked out quietly that day because I didn't know what they'd taken. Now I did. And I wanted it back. I closed my laptop, stood by the window, and watched the city wake up. The skyline glowed like a circuit board, cold, metallic, unfeeling. But somewhere inside those glass towers, my name was still echoing in meeting rooms. They thought the story was over. They were wrong. I whispered to my reflection, steady and cold. They mocked my exit interview. Now they'll remember my report. I realized revenge couldn't be a tantrum. It had to be a surgical strike. Lock the facts in a way no one could spin. I copied every unaltered file to 3 separate encrypted drives, each with a different deadman switch. If any drive disappeared or was tampered with, encrypted copies would auto-upload to a secure cloud I controlled. I time-stamped, notarized, and emailed myself copies so there was an auditable trail. Meticulous, boring work, the opposite of the screaming catharsis I'd pictured, and exactly what this fight needed. I needed people who owed me nothing and feared nothing. Jenna, the nervous co-worker who'd started the Be Careful texts, became my first recruit. She still had access to internal Slack channels and casual meeting invites. I fed her safe prompts, casual questions, déjà vu remarks in threads that might flush out gossip, tiny probes to see who repeated what, and to whom. She played the role of the accidental witness perfectly. Then there was Marco, an old college friend who built security tools for a living. He couldn't legally grab company servers, but he could read the crumbs, metadata, IP logs, the subtle fingerprints left when someone edits a file with their credentials. Marco's analysis turned the E.Crane label from accusation into evidence. He mapped a pattern of logins, remote edits, and approval timings that pointed like a laser to Elliot's account every time a modified file appeared. I reached out to one quiet, sharp former auditor who'd left the firm disgruntled, not my enemy, but someone who'd seen the same type of cover-up before and knew how the board would panic if presented with incontrovertible proof. He agreed to look at the stack of memos and approvals I'd compiled. He didn't promise to care about me. He promised to care about numbers, and numbers don't lie. People who climb by hiding dirty hands always keep those hands exposed around praise and ego. Elliot loved applause, meetings where his name was repeated. So I planted small, believable lies. A leaked mention that the execs were celebrating some cost savings initiative tied to compliance. I dropped breadcrumbs that made him comfortable showing his face at a particular internal review. Let him play the hero while I watched. Evidence matters, but timing makes it lethal. I coordinated quietly, Marco's logs, Jenna's witness notes, the notarized backups, and the ex-auditor's summary would all be packaged into a concise compliance report. Clean, precise, devastating. Not a rant. A dossier. I lined up a journalist who owed me a favor and a regulator contact who took whistleblower tips seriously. They still laughed, still believed the story was over. Elliot spoke at a management breakfast that week with the same rehearsed confidence. He didn't know the inbox where my dossier waited had already been opened by 3 secure eyes. I saved the final step for last, set the drop for the single moment when visibility would be maximum and deniability minimum. I sat with my hands folded, looking at the clock and the email subject line I'd written for months. Tomorrow morning, when the market was still waking and the execs were at their coffee, the compliance report would drop. And then everything would change. They laughed at my exit interview. They woke up to my name in their inbox. Dawn had barely broken when the first notice went out, not to HR, not to Elliot, but to the board, the regulator, and a reporter who knew how to turn facts into headlines. My subject line was clinical, almost cruelly calm: compliance dossier, evidence of systemic misconduct, immediate review requested. Attached, notarized backups, Marco's login maps, Jenna's contemporaneous notes, the ex-auditor's executive summary, and a clean, ruthless timeline showing every altered file and every approving signature that didn't belong to me. By 9:10 a.m., the newsroom's first headline pinged my phone. By 9:22, the board's emergency channel lit up with messages. By 9:30, Elliot was at the front of the room at Lennox Vale, pouring charm over coffee, proud and entirely unprepared. He started with jokes. He always did. The room laughed, a brittle sound that used to comfort him. Then someone at the back, the CFO, face gone grey, tapped her tablet. The headline scrolled across the screen: top compliance exec accused of framing subordinate in major audit cover-up. The laughter died mid-air like a snapped wire. Elliot's grin fractured. He looked at the board, the screen, then at the CFO's tablet where Marco's visual map flickered, a damning trail of IP addresses and timestamps that bobbed directly under his logins. Jenna's Slack excerpts popped up, casual questions she'd seeded, and the pattern of responses that showed who had pushed the meltdown narrative. The ex-auditor's report, concise and merciless, showed motive, bonuses, stock performance, and the deliberate redirection of an internal probe. Who sent this? Elliot demanded, voice sharper than I'd ever heard. No one answered. They couldn't. The evidence was no longer a rumor. It was a dossier that would survive lawyers, spin, and excuses. Security arrived quietly. An internal investigator read a short statement, pending suspension and referral to external authorities. The board chair's voice was hollow when she said it aloud. Elliot Crane is relieved of duties, effective immediately. He rose as if to protest, then sank into a chair as the realization settled. The man who'd built his power on other people's trust was suddenly alone in a room full of faces that had been his audience. Outside the conference room, cameras were already gathering. The reporter I'd lined up published a tight, sourced piece within the hour. It named names, quoted the ex-auditor, included screenshots of altered spreadsheets, and, most devastatingly for Elliot, a side-by-side comparison that made the manipulation obvious even to a lay reader. Lennox Vale's stock dipped on the morning's news. The CFO resigned under pressure. The board announced an independent audit. On his way out, Elliot's phone lit up with frantic messages from colleagues he'd charmed for years. He stared at them like they were foreign objects. No one met his eyes. No one offered a hand. He was escorted through the lobby under the cold gaze of security. Not in cuffs, not yet, but in unbearable silence. The applause he'd once lived for had been replaced by the hollow whir of cameras and the soft rustle of legal pads. Outside, employees peered from behind glass doors, mouths averted. I watched the live feed in my apartment, fingers wrapped around a mug gone cold. The city hummed on, oblivious and indifferent. When the feed cut, there was a moment, a long, ridiculous, sacred pause. The world had shifted on a tiny hinge, a sealed envelope, a careful archive, and a woman who refused to be erased. They mocked my exit interview. Then the compliance report dropped. And the silence that followed was louder than their laughter ever had been. 3 months later, the city moved on, but Lennox Vale hadn't recovered. The board was gutted, the CFO resigned under investigation, and Elliot Crane, well, he became the cautionary tale whispered about in glass-walled offices. He didn't go to jail, not yet, but he lost everything he'd built on deceit. The consultancy offers vanished. His LinkedIn turned into an echo chamber of supportive comments that stopped coming after a week. The golden boy of compliance now lived in professional exile, his reputation reduced to a headline and a footnote in corporate ethics training slides. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt still. It's strange. Revenge doesn't arrive with thunder. It settles quietly, like dust after an explosion. I spent those weeks piecing my life back together, part-time consulting, evenings helping my mother with her garden. Some nights, I'd sit on her porch and watch the light fade behind the trees, the air thick with the scent of mint and soil. That was the peace I'd fought for. Not applause. Not headlines. Just the right to breathe without being watched. Then one morning, I got a message. Unknown sender. No greeting. Just one line. I didn't think you'd actually do it. No signature. But I didn't need one. Elliot. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. The old ache flickered, anger, betrayal, everything he'd taken and twisted. But this time, it didn't control me. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and smiled. He wanted a reaction. All he got was silence. Because silence, the same thing he once used to erase me, was now my weapon. My freedom. They'd mocked my exit interview. Laughed when I spoke the truth. But truth has a way of outlasting the noise. I learned that vengeance isn't the opposite of justice. It's what justice looks like when no one else will deliver it. And sometimes, the most poetic justice is simply being heard after they tried to make sure you never would. I stood by the window that evening, watching the city lights shimmer against the skyline. Somewhere out there, another Maya was being silenced, doubted, or dismissed. I hoped she'd see this story and know, you can walk away, but you don't have to walk quietly. Because sometimes, the loudest exit is the one that ends in silence. Move a camera now. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed, at work, in love, or by someone you trusted completely? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear they're not alone. And if you felt this story, hit subscribe. The next tale of truth and revenge might just be yours.